Yeah, good evening, dear folks. I'd like to share with you a little piece of the history, in short, history of Israel in 5 minutes. For, well, 10, 15. Okay, we'll see. What is the history of Israel? Well, if we look at the Bible, and it's the only correct source of the history of Israel, then you see that we have, that's 4,500 years ago, we have the flood, the worldwide flood of Noah. Things like, there are many books about why it's a worldwide flood. Amongst it, it's this book, The Worldwide Flood by Charco Evenboer. There's very much evidence that the flood was very worldwide, because all the stories of the flood appear everywhere, hundreds of stories, in different tribes with Indians and in different, all over the world spread the same type of story. Guys, there was a flood. Okay, yeah, here they say this and here they say that, but it's all resemble the same worldwide flood. So we know there's a flood. Okay, Noah had 3 sons, Sem, Cham, and Jafet. Well, also in this book it's written down where all those people went to, and the children and the grandchildren, etc. Well, we know that out of Shem, came Terah and finally also Abraham, and there actually kind of starts the history of the Israelite Jewish people. And actually it started with Noah already, because Abraham is a descendant of Noah. Abraham was the forefather of the Israelite Jewish people. Well, we got God spoke to Abraham. God said to Abraham, okay, he said, okay, go out of the land you are now, Urch of the Chaldeans. It was in Mesopotamia, where Iraq is right now. And he went to Haran, that's in the north of Iraq, close to the border with Turkey, present-day Turkey. And then he descended back to what was then the land of the Canaanites. And in Canaan lived several people, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Hivites, and several people, little people, towns, little cities, and it was called people. And God said, okay, this land where you come here, the Canaan land, I will give to you and your sons thereafter. So that's a promise that God made to Abram. Well, then he got Izaak, Yitschak, his promised son, which Abram got on his old age, and which he had to sacrifice, and God stopped him just to test Abraham, his faith in God. And because of Abram was loyal to God, when God asked him, I want you to sacrifice Yitschak, Izaak, we know better as Isaac, because you were loyal to that mission that I told you to do. I will ensure you this promise that I give you this land where you are. And people say that Abraham sacrificed his son Yitzchak on the mountain of Moriah. Well, the Temple Mount is right now. That's what people say. It's very good possible. I don't know. I guess it is, but okay. There was a rock, and there he sacrificed Yitzchak. At least that's what I believe. Well, Yitzchak begot 2 sons, Esau, also called Edom, and Yaakov. Well, God also spoke to Yitschak when Abram died. He spoke to Yitschak, and also he said to Yitschak, "I will give you the land where you are right now. Your children will inherit this piece of land," and that's what God promised. Then Jacob came, and also Yitschak died, and the same was repeated with Jacob. And God said to Jacob, I will give you this land as an inheritance. I will give it to you and your descendants. Jacob got 12, actually 13 children, from which one was a girl, Dinah. And one of those sons, Joseph, was treated very badly by his brothers. And he was sold to Egypt, and there he became a Pharaoh king, or a king at least under the Pharaoh. And he provided that the sons of Jacob, including Jacob, with 70 or 72 people, went to Egypt, and there was a famine going on. And so they saved, Joseph saved his family by leading them into Egypt, etc. Well, a couple of 100 years later, there was a new Pharaoh that did not know Joseph. But that Pharaoh misused the Israelites, the present, that at that moment living Israelites, and they grew, of course. They had children and children's children, etc. So there was a big people, and the Pharaoh misused the Israelites as slaves. But God has still a promise to lead the Israelites, the descendants of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, to the land of Canaan, to inherit it. Well, Jacob, before he died, long before he died, he received the name, his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. Israel means Ish, man, human, Ra, fighting, or fighting, El, God. Elohim is also God in Hebrew. So man fighting with or against God. That's actually meaning his name. Struggling with God. And that's the name of Israel is referring to the grandson of Abram, Jacob. That's where the name of Israel comes from. Actually, it's another name of Jacob, the grandson of Abraham. So, the people of Israel, when they were living in Egypt, were slaves. And one of those slaves was actually adopted by the Pharaoh daughter, and that was Moses. Well, and Moses, in the end, he delivered, with God's help, of course. We know all the story. Most of you know the story. He delivered the Israelite people from Egypt, and they wandered around for 40 years in a desert. And then under Joshua, the follower of Moses, he conquered, together with all the Israelites, he conquered Canaan. Well, you say that's God is mean and killing all those people, and God allows it and things like that. Okay, but remember one thing: the Canaan people, existing of the Jebusites, Hivites, Hittites, Gibeonites, etc., etc. They worshipped different gods. Yeah, they worshipped Baal, Astarte, etc., etc., etc. But in that worship, they also had something called like temple prostitution, and they were eating all kinds of stuff that was not good. I mean, they eat pork, they eat shrimps and whatever kind of stuff. They had a very, very bad lifestyle. So those people at the maximum age became only 30 to 40 years old. Why? Because of the very bad living style. They had sex with everybody, they had sex with animals, and so on, so on, so on. So it was very weak and sick people. A lot of prostitutes, etc., etc. Well, we know what happens if you go, if men and women go to prostitutes, etc. You can get sicknesses from that. Well, it was a very, very bad people. And everybody in that people, and God was patient for hundreds of years, about at least 400 years, he said, okay, I have been patient. The measure of sins of these Canaanite people is full. So I allow you to kill them, because if I let them, you kill them, or I let them go on, they will get killed anyhow because of those illnesses, etc. And they don't worship me anyhow, so they're better off dead. That's the actual. That's kind of the story of the Canaanite people. They were very bad people, killing each other, robbing each other, etc., etc., etc. They were very unhealthy living. So God allowed them to kill them by the Israelites. The Israelites were a very healthy people. Why? Because they listened to God and they had a very healthy lifestyle. I mean, when Joshua, the follower up of Moses, entered Israel, he was 80 years old, so the double age of the Canaanite people, and he was healthy, strong, etc. Yeah, because they washed themselves. They had only they had a healthy way of living. Why? Because God gave His rules to live a healthy life. That's why they were healthy people. And God said, "Okay, I don't want the evil people with all their evil ways of doing, with all their unhealthy ways of doing. I don't want that in your land, so that you get infected by their way of doing. So wipe them out, everyone, and because they're living bad anyhow. So, and I don't want you to mingle with those people, so that you might end up doing the same thing as they did and destroying yourself. So I want them all wiped out, and you are going to inherit that land because you believe in me, etc., etc." Okay, so Joshua entered Israel and conquered it. Well, not entirely, unfortunately. He didn't. God said, "Okay, this and this is the measure of your land until this border, and here and there. That is Israel. That's going to be Israel." Well, Joshua unfortunately did not conquer that all. Otherwise, Israel would have been much bigger than it was in those days. Well, okay. In those days, there were kings and prophets, etc. But Israel also fell off of their belief of God, and also did wrong things. And twice the Israelites have been taken out of their country by the Babylonian exile in approximately 600 before Christ, and then 70 years later they came back. The second time that they got out of Israel was after Christ, in 70 after Christ, and in 130 after Christ. But God has, in the days that they were in the land Israel, from 3,500 years ago to approximately 2,000 years ago. So a long period they were there under God's supervision, etc. God has made some promises via the prophets to Israel. Okay, you will fall off of me and you will get out of the country, but you also will come back, etc. And that will happen in 2,000 years approximately after the last time that you are going out of Israel. So God has said that because of the disobedience of the Israelites, they got out of Israel twice. And in 70 after Christ and 135 after Christ, they were scattered all over the world where they are now today. And but God also said, well, after 2,000 years, I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Well, that started to happen in the years 1840, etc. From that point on, God returned the Jews. Okay, what was happening? In the almost 1900 years that Israel was, well, not entirely, there were always Jews living in Israel, in what we know as Israel right now. But there was a mixture of Jewish people and Arabic people for a small group of people, 50% Jews, 50% Arabic people. But it's a very small group. Why? Because God also said, if the Israelites are out of the country, that land will be a desert. It will be dry. Nobody wants to live it. Nobody wants to have it. It's a dry, desolate land. Nobody wants to have it. And that actually happened. In 1940 or 1941, approximately, search it out on Google if you don't believe me. Mark Twain, there's a famous poet, I think it's an American or English poet. He went to Israel, and what he knew that was the promised land. And he was traveling around in Israel, and said, "Man, this is desolate. It's a desert. I can imagine that no people wanted to live here." And he came to Jerusalem. He said, "Hey, man, this is a ruin where jackals and owls are living, but hardly any human is living in Jerusalem." So the claim that Jerusalem is the holy city of the Muslim is a lie, because it was a ruin in the time of 1840, around 1840. Well, next to that, the Jews were scattered all over the world, but in those about 2,000 years, they were not accepted where they were. They were killed everywhere in Europe and outside of Europe, in Arabic countries and in Russia, etc. They were killed. They were scattered all over, and they were chased after, and even promised by God. God said, "I will wipe you out of Israel, and I will scatter you all over the world, and I will send the sword behind you." Well, that literally happened. So it literally happened that the Jews were scattered out of the country, and the sword was behind them because they were persecuted, killed, and so on and so on. So that literally came true. Unfortunately for the Jews, but it happened. But God also said, well, after 2,000 years, approximately 2,000 years, I will bring you back in the land that I promised to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. So that happened in the years of 1850, 1880. What happened? In Russia, the Russian people, they started to kill Jews massively. Tens of thousands of Jews were killed in Russia in 1880. Well, the Jews fled to Israel via Turkey, via I think it's the Black Sea or something like that. Maybe it's here. The Black Sea, and also via Turkey. And that all exactly, they left Russia and that area via boats in the first place. That was around 1880, etc. And also that was prophesied in the Bible, where they said the first Jews will return via the ships of Tarsus. Well, Tarsus was in those days was a big harbor place in Turkey, and that prophecy came to fulfillment around 1880. Well, after that, the Jews, as the Bible says, would fly back home. Yeah. Well, that could only happen if the aeroplane was invented. Well, the aeroplane was invented in 1904. And from that time, the aeroplane developed, etc., so they could carry people. And also the Jews flew back in those airplanes back to Israel. So these prophecies are literally fulfilled. You know? But what the Jews started to go back to what we now know as Israel, and they started to buy land. This is very important. The Jews had money, and they started to buy the land from the people who were living there, the Arabic people who were living there. There were also Jews living, but they started to buy land from the Arabic people that were living there. It was a desert. Nobody was interested. It was certainly not a holy place for Muslims. Jerusalem was no holy city for nobody except the Jews. Not even for the Muslims. So they claim that Jerusalem is a holy city for the Muslims. That's rubbish, because before that nobody wanted to have the desert and those ruins. Nobody cared about it. The Arabics had hundreds and hundreds of years of making something out of the desert, but they didn't. So they left it a desert and did nothing with it. The Jews came back and they started to buy the land of Israel. Square after square, they started to buy it, and not only that, but they started to work on it. They started to make it fertile. They started to grow plants with blood, sweat, and tears, and suffering with their own lives, because it was a desert, and there were also a lot of swamps. And what happens with swamps, there are a lot of mosquitoes carrying malaria. So lots of Jewish people that worked, that they were the pioneers of building the land, Israel, they suffered from malaria and were killed by it. So by blood, sweat, and tears and their own lives, the Jewish people have built that land into a little paradise. And from that moment, the Arabs got interested. They said, hey, what the Jews are doing, we want that land. So they started to get jealous. And from that moment on, there was a rivalry between the Jews and the Arabs. But nonetheless, the Jews kept on buying land, sometimes even 5 times the price from what it was worth at that moment. So the Jews actually were robbed or cheated in buying that land. But the Jews made that land fertile. The Arabs did never make that land fertile, etc. Well, so it started to grow. Well, then the war came, the Second World War came, and more Jews tried to flee to Israel. And they also tried to buy more and more land. So the land over there is Israel's, is Jewish property. The Rothschild family, this is a banker's family, are Jewish. And what they do is they buy a lots of ground as what we know today as Israel. And also they started to grow fruit trees, oranges. We are all known about the world famous Jaffa fruits. Well, the Jaffa fruits come from Israel. And there's a place also called Jaffa, and that's stuck to Tel Aviv, under Tel Aviv, to the south of Tel Aviv. And it was a harbor place. And from that place, from that area, the oranges were spread out and sold all over the world. And even that is prophesied that Israel, from out of Israel, fruit will be sold all over the world. And that is happening still today. I mean, I have here dates, one moment, I'll take them. These are dates coming from land of Israel. Yeah, these are dates coming from Israel. Yeah, so and I always buy Israeli dates. I never buy other stuff. I like Israel dates, and I want to support them with this. So the thing is, the fruits were built in Israel from the 1880s till nowadays, and it was spread out to all over the world. And it was actually a prophecy in the Bible. So also that prophecy came true. And the land was restored as God has promised. The desert has been made fertile as it was promised in the Bible. The language, the Hebrew language, returned as was promised in the Bible. The coin, the national coin, the shekel, is returned as was promised in the Bible. So all these prophecies have become factually true in our days. And not only that, but also the UN, the United Nations, have internationally agreed in 1947 or now 48 that Israel would become a recognized state, a recognized country, as was promised in this Bible. On one day it was prophesied. Next to that, on 14 May 1948, the state of Israel was born on one day. Just exactly as the Bible has prophesied in Isaiah 66, verse 8. And there are more verses where you can find these prophecies. The next day, the 15th of May, all the countries around, 5 or 7 countries, attacked Israel because they didn't want that. And also that was prophesied in Zechariah 12, where Israel would be attacked from the countries around, and they won eventually. Israel had enemies, 1 to 400 enemies. One Israeli against 400 enemies, and still they won that war. And why? Because God has helped them. If there was no God, then Israel would be wiped out in 1948, long ago. So this Israel, the Jewish people, is the Jewish people of the Bible. Now, there's a recent theory that the present-day Jews are not really Jews, but Khazars. Well, sorry, folks. If God has fulfilled the promises of the Bibles to the present-day people, starting from 1880 till nowadays, then those are real Jews, as the Bible has promised, and no Khazars or whatever kind of other people. This is just an anti-Semitic lie. Well, this is in short the history of Israel, and the Jewish people are the promised people, as the prophecies has promised, and are fulfilled in front of our own eyes. Even that the Israel was be split up in other countries to the Gaza Strip and the Golan Heights. They gave it up for peace, as was promised and prophesied in the Bible. Folks, these prophecies have been fulfilled as we see today on television. And yeah, that's the history of the Jewish people, the Israelite people. And the Bible has become true in front of our own eyes. People, you can see it, you can read it in the Bible. If you don't believe me, read it in the Bible. It's there all along. Okay, it's a lot of reading. I agree. It's a thick book. I agree. But there's a lot of information, a lot of prophecies that have been fulfilled in front of our own eyes as we can see it. And that's the history. That's why Israel, the Jewish people, have the full right to live there, because they bought it. It's their own country. They have worked it and tilted it. It's their own country. And they gave up Gaza Strip to keep the peace. Well, then logic dictates that no bombs should come from the Gaza Strip. Yeah? Okay, bear that in mind. They gave up the Gaza Strip, their own land, their own bought land, and their own worked land. They gave it up for keeping the peace. Then stop bombing Israel. Well, this is in a nutshell, the history of Israel, and it's God's people, and they have the full right to live there. Okay, God bless you with wisdom, and read the Bible, because it's all in there. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, read the Bible. It's all in there. And whether you believe in it, it's all in there nonetheless. So you better read it, so you're not going to be surprised what's going to happen in the future. Okay, God bless, and Israel, God loves you, and Israel, God is behind you, because you are the people of God. Amen. Bye-bye.